What is up, Coordination? On the pod today, we are talking about the Gitcoin beta round. So this is a beta of Gitcoin's new decentralized quadratic funding protocols. On the pod today, we have Nate, who is workstream lead and a head of Allo Protocol and of GrantStack. Allo Protocol is the new protocol that allows anyone to run quadratic funding in their own DAO. Michelle is a product manager also on Allo Protocol and GrantStack. Ben is the grants program lead and lead troublemaker at Gitcoin. And so this round is about Gitcoin and quadratic funding. So if you have not heard, Gitcoin Grants is a crowdfunding application that has just delivered $50 million worth of impact to the Web3 ecosystem, funding for things like open source software, decentralized science, COVID relief, Ukraine, stuff like that. And basically what they've done at Gitcoin is released a new decentralized protocol version of that product. And this is the second round that is a new decentralized quadratic funding round on top of that product. So what is quadratic funding? Just basically a quick primer is that it is a funding methodology invented by Glenn Weil, Vitalik Buterin, and Zoe Hitzig that basically allows you to route capital to where the projects are the most democratically popular, as opposed to just the ones that are favored by the rich and the rich people. So basically, it's a way of democratizing the way you fund an ecosystem's public goods. And I am one of the co-founders of Gitcoin. And disclaimer, I hold GTC, which is the governance token of the Gitcoin network, but I'm disaffiliated from leadership at Gitcoin DAO. So purely playing the role of podcast host in this episode. And, this episode is all about the beta round. So basically there is millions of dollars of funding available at grants.gitcoin.co, available starting today. The rounds are Web3 open source software, ZK tech, Web3 community and education, climate solutions, Ethereum infrastructure, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are the core Gitcoin rounds. And then they also have featured community rounds. So this is an interesting new thing, is that communities can now run their own rounds. And those are Web3 social, ENS, token engineering, meta crisis, decentralized science, mantle grants, Greater China, the Sybil resistance, and advocacy quadratic funding rounds. So go to grants.gitcoin.co today, check out the projects that are in those rounds, and let's fund public goods. So this episode is all about the grants beta round, and Nate and Michelle and Ben are the ones to tell you about it. So without further ado, I give you the Gitcoin beta round. Enjoy, Coordination.
HAIRDAO is here to route around the middlemen in biomedical research for hair loss. HAIRDAO is an open source investment and operating organization using the coordination tools of Ethereum to begin exploring the frontier of biomedical research that bureaucracy and middlemen have previously prevented. Did you know that 66% of men and 50% of women will experience hair loss in their lifetimes? HAIRDAO has already done some crazy cool science stuff, like their first research study on the impact of synthetic T3 and T4 thyroid hormones on the human scalp, and is also the second DAO ever to mint an IP NFT. So if you want to explore the frontier of the decentralized science movement, and maybe also you've lost your hair along the way, check out HAIRDAO at hairdao.xyz.
What's up? What's up, y'all? Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hello, GM, sir.
GM. So Gitcoin beta round, tell us about the beta round. What is it and when is it? I guess this question will start with you, Ben.
Could not be more excited about the Gitcoin beta round. This is the first time we've opened up the new Gitcoin grant stack that these two lovely humans I'm joined with today have been working tirelessly on for quite a while at this point. The beta round is going to be open from the Tuesday the 25th to May the 9th. So, good 2 weeks for folks to get in and show their support for a lot of different projects. We have 5 core rounds and 8 featured rounds. The core rounds were selected by a vote from community members. So the core rounds that we have, and I'm just going to read this right off the webpage, which is grants.gitcoin.co. We have the Web3 open source software round, the ZK tech round, Web3 community and education round, climate solutions, and core ETH infrastructure. Those are the rounds that are being run by Gitcoin. And then we have 8 featured rounds that are sort of run at arm's length by a group of partners. We have Web3 social, ENS, token engineering, which is the token engineering commons, The Meta Crisis round run by Super Modular. Very excited about that one. DeSci run by a group of community stewards who actually just had a vote using JokeDAO to determine who was doing their eligibility checks and whatnot. Very cool to see. Mantle run by BitDAO. A Greater China round for folks in the Chinese community. A Sybil Resistance round run by a bunch of folks from our fraud detection and defense team, as well as an advocacy round run by Coinbase, which should be a big one this round, given all the stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. So big, exciting round, as well as some interesting experiments happening. We've got a DEI round that is sort of a meta round on top of the other rounds, where folks who are eligible can get some bonus funding if they're from underrepresented groups. We also have a little experiment going on with our friends from ReFi DAO, supporting some local nodes who are doing organizing, which is kind of a subset of the Web3 community round. Lots going on. Super excited to see how this all plays out using the new tools and all the nifty innovation that's kind of happening as a result of playing with everything that's possible in this Web3 space.
Great. And so the round begins on April 25th, it looks like, which is the exact date that this podcast will go live. So good timing. If you're listening, go check out grants.gitcoin.co and contribute to one of the rounds.
Yeah. Some awesome projects in there. Definitely would love to get some donations going.
Yeah, for sure. So I wonder if you could tell us some stories or highlights of the grantees, Ben. So what's most exciting out of the whole breadth of everything that's happening in the beta round? What's the most exciting thread that you want to pull?
Man, it's hard to pick favorites because there's so many interesting things that happen. Personally, I just love seeing coordination in action. There's a group that calls themselves the Quadratic Friends, which is actually kind of grew out of a number of grantees in the DEI round back in GR15, which feels like several lifetimes ago in Web3 time. But that group has continued to organize and support a whole bunch of different community members. They've created their own onboarding guides, instructional videos. They've really been holding the hands of other grantees, making their way through our tech and onboarding some new people into Web3, as well as pulling some folks from the NFT space or the DeFi space kind of into this world of public goods funding. So, one of my favorite stories to tell about, just what we see happening is, just all these kind of forms of peer support and outreach that are just kind of blossoming inside of the Gitcoin community. We've seen all of these Twitter spaces popping up, like these kind of day-long shill spaces with people just coming all day long, jumping in, talking about their projects. And the end result is a lot of cross-pollination, like, folks meeting, their co-founders or like creating new coalitions. It just seems to bubble up more and more the more of these rounds that I've had a chance to watch. I'd be super curious to hear some of what you saw happen in some of the earlier days. But definitely it's like it's something that is kind of taking on a life of its own, where community just kind of jumps in and says, like, we want to do this, we want to see things happen. We'll just create the resources ourselves. And I think it bodes well for what's possible as people start talking about like forks and other experiments and all the kind of cool things that are going to happen, when Allo Protocol becomes something that's available for anybody to play with and invent, what they'd like to see happen in the quadratic lands.
Amazing. Yeah, and I'd love for Nate and Michelle, I don't know if there's any stories about grantees or things that stick out for you with respect to projects that are in the beta round. But one of the reasons I love asking this question is that quadratic funding is kind of a signal aggregation mechanism where different people can have different takes, different vantage points on the rounds and things that they're most excited about. So with that in mind, Nate or Michelle, I don't know if you have any projects or trends that you're most excited about.
Yeah, on my side, I'm really excited just seeing all of the messaging concepts that are coming through. I think there's a lot of projects trying to solve wallet-based messaging, which just feels like such a big part of what we're trying to do. I think it's something that's top of mind for us too, just because we've been thinking about, how do we use this as a way for ecosystems and projects to start like building their communities and working and just like working to build around that. So I think from my end, I would just echo what Ben said. It's been awesome seeing like these kind of communities forming themselves. Is one of the reasons that we tried to build GrantStack as like a self-serve tool. So it's awesome to see that starting to happen before the tech is even there. I think it's just great to see like messaging as a trend. I think happening across the space too. I wish I knew more about the climate projects. I usually go to Ben and say, Ben, tell me more, or tell me who I need to go to. But I'm always so hyped to see the activity and the excitement around it too.
Don't get me started. I could talk for a while about the climate projects. There's some really cool stuff. Maybe if you'll allow me one quick climate story, just because I think there's some really interesting
by
stuff
all means, let's get you started, Ben. Let's go.
All right. There's a project called Shamba Network that some of you might have heard of. They're an Oracle project, so they're like taking satellite data and making it possible to help fund both carbon offset funding for farmers in Kenya, but also doing stuff around crop insurance, which I think is really interesting. So if let's say you're a farmer in a small town somewhere, you've got very limited internet access. We've actually been putting them in touch with this other project that is also in a similar part of the African continent, who is helping people take on-chain interactions and then turn them into credits on cell phones. So for people who don't have like access to the internet, even with like a cheap little phone, you can get these like hour dollars or minute dollars that a lot of people actually use kind of as a replacement for cash, in some less developed countries. So now, like, just imagine this farmer, standing in a field somewhere, doesn't have any idea that all this stuff's going on the blockchain, that satellite data is being pulled down. They just have an agreement where if it doesn't rain enough in a certain period of time and they're not able to make the money because they've got this insurance package that, somebody walked up to them on their farm, told them about, onboarded them. The end result is something just magically shows up on their cell phone. And now they can take those little minutes and transfer them, through SMS text messages to somebody else, so that they can buy food or whatever they need on their farm. So this kind of combination of Shamba Network and this other project that I'm trying to remember the name of, I think they're called Coinly. But cool seeing these different projects come together. One actually came through the UNICEF round that we ran earlier this year as kind of one of the first experiments on the platform. And the other one has been sort of one of the top recipients of funding, in some past Gitcoin climate solutions rounds. So that kind of cross-pollination is really cool. And just actually seeing the pictures that Shamba Network posts of these farmers who, are benefiting from the activity of people, whether it be trading carbon offsets on chain in New York or wherever else they might be. But the end result is that it's like actually putting money directly in the hands of people who need it. And I just think that's super cool.
Yeah, it's been super cool, like just seeing all the hype around like the Web3 community and education round two. I think it's like our most applied to round at this point. Also, fun fact, Iwaki, there's multiple applications for setting up GreenPilled chapters worldwide in there. So the trend is spreading.
Yeah, totally. Well, quick shill for that. If you're interested in creating a GreenPilled chapter, we've got ones in Japan and India and China. And there's a Discord that will have a link in the show notes that people can join if they're interested in setting one up in their own jurisdiction. And then also you can, we're going to hit a critical mass where there likely will already be one in your own jurisdiction. So check that out for sure. Michelle, I feel like we haven't gotten a chance to center your voice yet. So what are you most excited about with respect to the round?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Ben and Nate shared. I think generally just sort of an observation of the beta rounds versus the alpha rounds is just sort of seeing all the different types of rounds running on the same grant stack, same protocol. It's super cool to see that we're supporting rounds like deep in like ETH infrastructure and OSS, and then also we're seeing climate, we're seeing all these different new niche pockets. Would be super exciting to see in future rounds like more like IRL or more like maybe like Web3 adjacent rounds. Super cool to sort of see more funding go to folks who don't even understand like what Web3 is or what blockchain is, but understand the impacts of the work that we're doing. So generally super cool to sort of start to see us expanding it more into different niche categories.
Great. Well, it sounds like if people want to get involved in funding any of these grants or just want to check out what's out there, they can go to grants.gitcoin.co and do that. And this episode will be airing on the start of the grants round. So if you're listening to this, then the time is right. Is there anything else that the time is right to contribute? Is there anything else to say about the program in the current round? If not, would love to talk about GrantStack next.
I mean, I could ramble on about the program endlessly, but we should probably talk about GrantStack. I think just cool to sort of point out some of the nifty new features that are happening, as the result of what's built in GrantStack. So maybe that's a good sort of transition to just kind of talking about where things are at. But in terms of the experience we see users having, just the fact that everything's gated on Passport, that you're actually writing your proposals on chain. This is the first time for a lot of people that they're having that experience, and it's just really interesting to watch people have that experience of actually creating their proposals on chain and supporting each other in the process of doing that. I just raise my hands to these wizards and all the work they're doing to make that all possible. I think just getting those feedback loops of kind of what is working and how people are sort of experiencing it. It has been the part that's super exciting for me, is just to kind of be a point of contact between, the folks that are using the platform either as supporters or grantees, and then kind of coming back to Nate and Michelle and going how do we make this change, or how do we make this work so that that the beauty of kind of building the spaceship while it's flying, and doing it in real time in public together is a pretty neat thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it feels like there's a quarterly round, and I've of course disaffiliated from Gitcoin leadership, but back when I was involved in running the Gitcoin grants rounds, we would always learn from the last round and then talk to Vitalik or whoever else about how to change the experience and then deploy that, and then the next round would be updated from there. So it feels like this is the second cycle of doing decentralized grants. And the alpha round was the first one 3 months ago, and this is the beta round, and it feels like that iterative cycle is starting all over again. And it's an opportunity to try. I know that some of our listeners had problems with Passport going down very first in the alpha rounds, and it feels like y'all have learned from what you had in the alpha round and have deployed fixes. So definitely give it another shot if you had problems with Passport in the alpha rounds, because every quarter the idea is that it iterates forward. So Nate, I'll maybe hand it off to you. What's going on with GrantStack and what's happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, one of the reasons that I've been so excited about this project and the reason we've been working on it so hard for the last 6-9 months, however long it's been, is we've been really wanting to take QF out of kind of a centralized private stack and just give it to the people. We really wanted to democratize quadratic funding and let anyone come in and do that. And that's what we've really been laser focused on as we've been launching this first version of GrantStack. The alpha rounds was our first real pass at that. It was a lot of MVP functionality, seeing how it could work for folks. We're planning to launch this self-serve experience on May 15th. That's when anyone will be able to go to manager.gitcoin.co and start a round. But the beta rounds are sort of our last test drive of what we've been working on in the product. And I'd love to turn it over to Michelle to talk a little bit about what that means, because I think we've been just cooking up some awesome stuff to really make self-serve a reality.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Nate. I guess maybe taking a step back, I think GrantStack is composed of 3 primary products. Builder, which is for project owners to go in and create your project, eventually build reputation, apply to rounds. And then we have Manager, which is primarily for program managers, round operators to receive applications, review applications, approve, reject applications, manage the round, create the round, I forgot about that, create the round, and just generally coordinate all things round logistics, payouts as well, which we'll get into in a sec. And then our last product in the GrantStack currently is the Explorer, which is really what you're seeing during a round when you're going into a round and looking at projects, donating, etc. So just to kind of provide a little bit of that context when we say GrantStack, that's really what we're talking about. We ran the alpha rounds on all 3 of those products back in January, and learned a lot of really great stuff from that first pass. So coming to the beta rounds, some of the new things that we are building / have been building include payouts, so being able to enable communities to pay out their grantees entirely via Allo Protocol, just generally more ways for program managers and round operators to customize their rounds. You can set matching caps, minimum donations, you can add new question types, you can gate applications based off of project socials and stuff like that. So just adding some more customizability there. Also having more consistent and auditable QF calculations with a new indexer tool that we've built, improved and streamlined donation flow. So this will be for donors on Explorer, like just having a more intuitive and easy to understand way of finding projects to support and donating to them. Also working on improving round discovery, so being able to like see what rounds are going on at all times and being able to explore, toggle between rounds for donating and stuff like that. And also a whole host of new enhancements for grantees. One of the biggest things that we heard during the alpha rounds is really wanting to have rich text. So that's available this round. We support Markdown. We're showing you a preview of what your project will look like on Explorer. So lots of sort of bells and whistles to improve the application flow and general grantee experience. And we have a brand new passport score. So we'll hopefully have even more accurate scoring mechanisms this round. But yeah, we can dive into any of those, but just sort of as like a quick overview, some of the, lots of really good stuff happening on the Allo side.
Yeah, and so Allo Protocol, what is that short for allocation protocol?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, it is. Cool.
I'm pretty sure, but just checking.
Yeah. Weird. Well, I'm excited. I'm curious which which features or changes to Grant Stack that you're most excited about.
Michelle, why don't you go first? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I worked a lot on the grantee improvements, so like adding rich text, application preview, also just having new like bells and whistles for customizing rounds. So that was really exciting to hear because it really felt like so me and the design team, we did a lot of UX research and feedback and hopped on a lot of calls with grantees that participated in the alpha rounds and the UNICEF rounds. So I think it was really awesome to sort of hear that was something that grantees themselves wanted and was definitely like a pain point throughout the alpha round. So I feel really great and happy to be able to deliver that on the product side this round. Like a lot of the primary pain points around like rich text, around being able to like see your project and be able to edit it. It feels like it's one of those times where like this aligns with like our product and protocol development and is also like directly addressing what some of our core users really want. So feels super fulfilling on my side to see that roll out in the beta rounds.
Yeah. On my side, it's been I've also been working really deeply on the QF calculations, and I think one of the things that's been awesome about this project is trying to figure out how to make QF approachable for people who have not like managed a QF experience before. We've been running them for 4 years, so we just have a ton of like institutional knowledge built up around how to do it, but it can get really complex really fast. So within Grant Stack, we've been trying to design for basically two sort of approaches. One is like the easy button for QF, and then one is like enabling more sophisticated users if they want to do deeper Sybil analysis. So it's been fun to think through like how do we take things like matching caps and minimum donations and passport and make those really easy for folks to turn on without having to think too much about it. So we have a flow like that, which I'm really excited for people to start using, to start getting feedback on. But we've also started just surfacing more of the data so that if you do want to go deeper and like audit around, or if you do want to like edit results or do more like sophisticated Sybil analysis, we've now like made it a lot easier to pull that data and work with it. So trying to help people who are really like pushing forward the implementation and the practice of quadratic funding while also making it really approachable for new people who are trying it for the first time. So really excited to start seeing how people use that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the meme there is decentralizing Gitcoin, right? It's not about just putting the protocols out there, but it's also making all of the design decisions that Gitcoin has traditionally had to be made accessible. And I think that what you've been calling it is self-serve QF, right?
Exactly.
So, how do you, instead of fishing for all these DAOs that might run or one quadratic funding or any type of funding round, how do you teach them to fish? So, can you tell me a little bit more about self-serve, Nate?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was, I think Ben, and I'm sure you saw it too, Waki, was like, as we were running more and more rounds on our old platform, we were just seeing like more and more communities were like, I want to do this. Like, how do I do this? How do I get involved? And it was just really hard to get people up to speed. Like I think QF is a great mechanism for like tapping the will of the crowd and really identifying like the hotspots in the community. But there is definitely a learning curve for managers to come in and figure out like, okay, how do I do this in the right way? Like, how do I think about it? How do I configure it? And kind of solving that problem was really the core thing behind self-serve. So for us, a lot of it was around like, how do we sort of strip back QF to something that is really easily understood? I think when I think about QF, I think about it more as like a category of funding mechanisms as opposed to one individual funding mechanism. So what we've done is try to implement the simplest version of that. So linear QF is the initial mechanism that we've built and launched on GrantStack. We are letting program managers set a matching cap. This basically makes sure that like the pot is spread more evenly across projects. We've given them the ability to set a minimum donation. We found that if you set like kind of a lower threshold for donations, then you increase the cost of a Sybil attack and you start to reduce the overall risk of Sybil attack on your round. And then we've also upgraded our passport score. And passport, I think, is one that for us, we feel like there's a ton of sophistication, but also a lot of ease of use that we want to be thinking about. So right now, you basically have the ability to turn passport on or off. We have an out of the box passport score that checks for unique humanity and will like gate donations or gate matching, on whether or not the person has that. So those are the three levers we decided to use for this sort of intro QF or QF 101, self-serve QF, a bunch of different names. But those are the things we're going to be giving to people and letting them play with. Personally, I'm just excited to see what the feedback is. Yeah, Ben, you want to add something?
I just wanted to give a shout out to this group that we're calling the GROGs, the Grant Round Operators Guild, who are like where a bunch of these folks that Nate is talking about, who are like interested in running their own rounds or are actively involved in running our featured rounds, are coming together. Right now it's basically just like a Telegram thread and a series of assets that we've created, like run books and Loom videos that help walk people through things. But it's become a really generative space really quickly. It's cool to see all these different folks with sort of different visions of what they're trying to build, kind of coming together and like jamming on how to actually implement this and supporting each other implementing it. So I just wanted to throw out that if anybody is interested in running their own round using the existing grant stack, the GROGs is a great place to plug in. There's a lot of rounds that could always use another set of hands to get involved and to get some experience. And this is going to be for, folks running grants rounds, not just during our quarterly program, but also anybody who's interested in running independent rounds, can kind of plug into this community and really decentralize the skills that are required sort of in that human technology space to sort of successfully coordinate, organize, and run around. I just wanted to make sure that was out there, that if people are interested in getting involved, that the GROGs is the way to do it. You can just reach out to, folks from Gitcoin any number of different ways on Telegram, Discord, Twitter, and we'll sort of point you in the right direction as to sort of who to talk to and how to get involved. But it's a pretty neat thing to see in terms of like just all these brilliant minds kind of working together to try to envision sort of what we could build collectively.
Yeah, I'm a lurker in that Telegram group, and there's just a lot of fire and gold happening in there. It's pretty exciting just to see everyone working together. It's also, I mean, it's even happening within Gitcoin too. Like we just approved a GCP where some members of the community are going to run their own QF round to fund like projects that are happening around Gitcoin. So it's cool to see it just becoming this like emergent way of like, we have an idea, we have some funds, how do we organize people around it? So
for the uninitiated, GCP stands for?
Yes, Gitcoin Community Proposal. So we had some members of our group want to support some of the work that's been happening around Gitcoin over the past few months. We've seen things like people creating Dune dashboards for the protocol. We've seen kind of like side projects that are happening. We just think there's like so much cool stuff happening at the edges within the Gitcoin community. And some members of the DAO decided to submit a proposal to get some funding to run QF rounds to support those folks. So just really excited to see that come to fruition.
Yep. Well, I'm wondering if there's anything else that y'all want to say about Allo Protocol or GrantStack or the product group within Gitcoin. I mean, I feel like most of our listeners are primarily interested in the program, but the product is the foundation of the program. So just, what do we know? Should we know about its continued evolution? And maybe Nate, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So just by way of context, we have two kind of products that we're thinking about. One is Allo Protocol, which is our protocol for democratic fund allocation. So basically a protocol for communities to pool funds and decide how they want to distribute it with legitimacy. And GrantStack is our first app built on top of the protocol. And that's really aimed at communities that are running grants programs specifically and giving them a really friendly interface for spinning those up and running with them. We've been building those two like very tightly together for the last 6 months as we've been getting this first version out. And I think we're about to get to the point where you're going to start seeing some divergence and starting to see us work on different things, which I'm super hyped about. So on the GrantStack side, we've always been big believers in QF, and that's why we wanted to build it first. It's a big part of the Gitcoin brand. But I think one of the things that we've been learning as we talk to other communities is that there are a lot of different types of grants that happen both within Web3 and outside of Web3. And we want to be able to give teams more tools for doing that. So in GrantStack, you'll see like quadratic voting as a type of grant program coming into our suite. We're also creating what we're calling a direct grants program, which is a little bit more of apply for a specific amount of funds and get that amount of funds based on like a smaller group approval or committee approval type thing. So those are what we're kind of looking at our base set for GrantStack. We feel like if we have those three tools in there, most program managers will have kind of 80% of what they need to run their grants programs. On the Allo side, we're going to start focusing in a lot more on builders in the ecosystem, where GrantStack is focused on like program managers and communities. Allo is really focused on people who want to be able to leverage this democratic capital allocation tool. So we have a bunch of different archetypes that we've been talking to on that side. We've been working with independent grants apps who want to use like the project registry that we're creating to be kind of like the back end for their own applications that they're building. We're seeing some communities who want to like build their own version of GrantStack, essentially, like really own the end-to-end experience of how their community members engage with their grants rounds. We're also just seeing some other really fun integrations. Like some folks are sort of saying, like, as soon as you create a project within Allo, like they want to also create that project entity in their own protocol. So I don't want to steal too many people's ideas or dox too many things, but like that's kind of what we're seeing happening, which is super exciting. So the TLDR, I think on the GrantStack side, you're just going to start seeing more types of grants programs that you can run through those UIs and have that like self-serve friendly experience. And then on the Allo side, we're going to be getting a lot deeper with builders and trying to make the protocol just more user friendly to build on.
Michelle, let me know if you have anything to add. If not, we can move on.
I think the only other thing I will add is we had done a lot of research around this concept of project reputation. I think heading into I actually for like the last like few months. So I think that's something that we'll start to see come to fruition a little bit more. We want to build more mechanisms and tools for project owners who are participating in rounds, but also doing other great stuff that's building their project reputation. We want to sort of start to formalize and productize, I guess, what that would look like within the Allo Protocol ecosystem. So perhaps like if you participated in a lot of rounds, right, and you received a certain amount of funding, and you are able to prove that you did what you said you were going to do with that funding, that lends well to your overall project reputation. Maybe we're also going to be pulling in your personal reputation, like on like a sort of a team member basis. And impact certificates generally have been something that we've discussed on the project reputation side. Also migrating data from the legacy Sequence platform and having that build towards existing projects' reputation. I think these are all sort of things that we'll re-explore in the next, I would say, like probably 3 to 6 months, and maybe we'll see some of that come to fruition in that timeline as well. Yeah.
I just wanted to add how excited I am about that in particular. In terms of like solving problems for folks that are deep in the weeds of like operating grants rounds, the eligibility decisions around like, who should be in a round or shouldn't be in a round can be some of the most time consuming and difficult stuff. And I think that that's just going to be a huge unlock for people trying to run rounds, like just having more data points, more like information, both in terms of like helping with fraud protection, which, is always an arms race with the, all the folks trying to like find their ways to sort of scam the grants round or like, hack the grants round. But like at the same time, it's tough to make some of those decisions. And like the more that you've got, whether it be impact certificates or like other forms of digital identity, or hypercerts, there's a lot of these different primitives that are kind of floating around in the space that I think are just going to massively unlock opportunity for people to like much more easily deploy rounds and make those eligibility decisions, especially when you're doing this at scale. Like just thinking about some of our rounds where we've had like 1,000 grantees and a team of people have to carefully go through and do the review of each one of them. Couldn't be much more excited about what that will mean, not only for Gitcoin and our ability to like run more rounds and offer more public goods, but like I think for a lot of our partners who are trying to run around for the first time, just having those kinds of tools at their disposal, I think is really going to be a game changer.
We've got about 5 more minutes left. I'm wondering if there's anything I didn't ask y'all that you want to say.
I feel like my brain has been so deep in getting ready for these beta rounds that I haven't had room for anything else. I'm just so hyped for self-serve QF to be live. I'm excited for the beta rounds to be up and running. I'm kind of excited to get back to normalcy. And I feel like we've been in this sort of wilderness as we've been like transitioning onto GrantStack and the protocol. So I'm just really excited for us to be sort of past those awkward years and start getting into getting more people building on top of it.
Yeah. I'm just realizing, I think it's actually been roughly exactly a year since I joined Gitcoin. And I remember when I joined, we had stickies on a Miro board. That was our protocol. So I think we've come a really long way. So I'm super excited and generally really excited to see all of the rounds kick off next week. Self-serve, same with me. Yeah.
I just want to wish everybody best of luck in the round. I'm sure there's folks out there listening who are like jumping into the quarterly grants round as kind of a shelling point for coordination for them and a way to fund their projects. It's always a sort of interesting moment for the community overall, just as we see kind of all the new stuff that's bubbling to the surface and people kind of get to know each other and what people are building. I'm always interested to see what trends kind of evolve and emerge. That's a nifty thing to experience. And I just encourage everybody to like double down on coordination, like, really go and like help others who are sort of new to the space, and also like share what you've learned as a past grantee if you are one. And if this is your first grants round, like don't be shy to reach out for support or help or ideas. We do have this grantee portal, which you can find at link.gitcoin.co/grantee. No S's in there, just link.gitcoin.co/grantee. And that's got a whole bunch of guides and run books and videos and things to help you with like all the different aspects of, being a grantee. And don't be shy about showing up on Twitter Spaces and, shilling your project. That's a big part of Gitcoin grants rounds is like sharing your ideas, and really refining your ability to like talk about and answer questions about your project. So, as our friend Pranav says from ReFi by South, people come to Gitcoin for the funding, but they stick around for the community. That definitely has been true in what I've seen. So, I'm just stoked to see all the new people who pop up in the community, and I look forward to giving you all virtual high fives on out there on Twitter and elsewhere as the round gets underway. So, yeah, best of luck to everybody.
Yeah. And whatever you do, do not DM Owaki on Twitter asking for grants round support. I've been disaffiliated for a year now. You can stop DMing me for Gitcoin support. Yeah, and the grantee portal is where you can get support. And I know there's an intercom on the site in order to close that loop. So it's kind of an inside joke, but yeah, don't DM Owaki for support on Gitcoin. It happens every round, no matter how far I've been disaffiliated.
I think my first job at Gitcoin was helping to have less stuff show up in your inbox for Shelling Point 2 years ago, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, it's been a journey for sure. I mean, I think that, of course, I'm disaffiliated from Gitcoin leadership, and Gitcoin's now a DAO, but I think I'm still known as the Gitcoin founder, and so I think it's okay for me to share that, like, Gitcoin started off as a bounties network, and then it launched Kudos, which was this NFT, and then it had an ad network, and then it had Gitcoin Labs, and then like Gitcoin Grants launched, and Gitcoin Grants was originally a subscription service where you could subscribe to your favorite grants and then pay them $9.99 a month. And the big idea back then was that everyone was monetizing with ICOs. Why not monetize with subscriptions and actually build a base of revenue? Turns out no one cared about subscriptions, and we pivoted to QF, and then had 15 successive rounds of quadratic funding, chasing that local maxima of what quadratic funding looked like. But then when Vitalik kind of pointed out that, this is becoming a pillar of the Ethereum ecosystem, we realized, wait, it needs to be decentralized so it can be credibly neutral and more democratic. And so we had to come down from that local maxima of the best centralized product that we could produce under the circumstances, and now chase the global maxima of decentralization. And I feel like now that we're finally getting to a point where we're gonna getting close to that local maxima that we had to descend down, and like passing that to chase a new global maxima of decentralized coordination. And the fact that we're even talking about self-serve QF on a protocol just shows how far it's been. But I just wanted to paint a picture for the listener of how much iteration it has been in order to get to this point. And wow, it's been 6 years of trying to figure that out. And I just wonder where things are going to be in 6 more years from now. So that's my long tail perspective on where things are at. But TLDR, congratulations on getting the program to beta. Looks really good. Curious to see what we learned from the beta rounds.
Yeah, us too. We're excited.
Cool.
Super excited.
Well, as we wrap, maybe I'll ask each of you for a closing statement or a closing few words, maybe a sentence or two. And since I know that Ben can YOLO, I will pass it to you first, Ben. Any last words?
I always find the book recommendations that you do on Green Pill interesting. This is totally out of left field, but I'll throw out a book just because I read an interesting book that I think some of the folks listening might be into. It's called Tracers in the Dark, a guy named Andy Greenberg, a writer for Wired magazine. It's about how like FBI and CIA are using blockchain technology for hunting down criminals on the dark web and whatnot. I think it's like super controversial. Like it definitely opens up kind of this conversation around like, is blockchain a divining rod for finding criminals for governments? And like in the context of all this discussion around sort of where blockchain fits in our society right now, I just think it's an interesting perspective for folks who are in this space to sort of see how we're being talked about by others kind of at an arm's length from the space. Also interesting how many of the people in the book now work for big orgs in crypto. But I think there is some very interesting perspective in there. And I think it would be a useful conversation for people to be having in this space kind of, as we talk about sort of how crypto fits into our world.
Sure. Might be too reductionist, but I think crypto's impact on the world will be weirder and more nuanced than we all imagined. And that's maybe an example of that.
Absolutely.
All right. Anyone else want to take a swing at my prompt closing statement?
I like the book recommendation idea. I can roll with that.
Okay.
I'm reading, in a very different vein, I'm reading Rick Rubin's new book, The Creative Act, which is basically a bunch of like short sort of meditations on how people can be creative in everyday life, and sort of like how do you sort of tap into the things that excite you and enable you to really like unlock new ideas. So it's really not like a front to back reading experience. It's more of like drop in, read a few pages, take the idea and move on.
Non-linear. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fantastic book. Highly recommend. And yeah, I guess the last plug would just be go donate grants.gitcoin.co.
There you go. We had to end on a shill. All right, Michelle, what do you got, if anything?
Oh gosh. I honestly wish I had as good book recommendations as Nate and Ben have. I guess my closing note is just, this has been awesome. Yeah, thank you for having us, Milwaukee. Definitely a listener of GreenPilled, so super cool to be here.
Totally. Well, congratulations on launching the beta rounds. And for the listeners, go contribute at grants.gitcoin.co. As of today, the round is live. Peace and love, everyone.